Somewhere in your city, a bird remembers exactly what you did 3 years ago. It remembers the angle of your face. It remembers the threat carried by your hands. It remembers the place where it happened. And before you reach the next intersection, that memory may already be moving through the air above you. You call it a crow. That word sounds too small for what it is. You think the wires belong to the power grid. You think the rooftops belong to the buildings. You think the intersection belongs to you because your species poured the concrete. But from above, the city resolves into perches, sightlines, thermal lifts, escape corridors, and faces. So many faces. So many moving targets. One of them wears a blue hat. The bird fixes on that blue hat with a precision that feels personal. You used to call a fool a bird brain. That insult survives from an old human error. Birds lack a layered mammalian cortex. So you assume the machinery for high intelligence is absent. But some avian brains carry 3.1 billion neurons, a compressed starfield of circuitry packed into a chassis no larger than a walnut. You built arrogance on anatomy. Evolution never signed that agreement. The crow does not need a human-style brain to do a human-scale act. It recognizes you. It warns others. It stores a grievance. Then the unease deepens. Because memory inside one animal is familiar. A dog can remember a command. An elephant can remember a route. A primate can remember a face. But how does a creature this small maintain a wanted poster that seems to outlive the witness that first saw the crime? How does a grudge remain active after the original observer dies? How does a bird turn a single encounter into a social inheritance? That is the part most people never notice. They hear a harsh call from a branch and mistake it for noise. They see a cluster forming on a wire and mistake it for chance. They watch a crow dive at one pedestrian while ignoring the rest of the crowd and call it aggression. But the blue hat is not being harassed at random. The blue hat is being marked, catalogued, pushed into a living archive. The city goes on beneath that archive with the confidence of a species that thinks observation is a one-way power, and all the while, above the lanes and traffic lights and windows glazed with our own reflection, another kind of intelligence studies us through a brain built on a different architectural plan, one that does not imitate the human design at all, one that waits just beyond the old insult, inside the dark folded mass of the avian forebrain, where the real mechanism begins. The primary weapon is not the beak. It is density. A crow brain is a high-density microprocessor, a neural engine that compresses serious computation into a miniature chassis. The old mammal bias assumes larger means smarter. That assumption fails here. What matters is not only size. What matters is packing. What matters is how many processors fit inside the shell and how efficiently they speak to one another. Neurons, the signal-bearing cells of thought, like a planet-wide telecom grid collapsed into wet tissue, crowd the avian forebrain at a rate that unsettles the human hierarchy. In some birds, the numbers rival or exceed those of many primates despite far smaller brain mass. You are not looking at a reduced machine. You are looking at a compressed one. That compression changes the tone of everything the bird does. The crow does not feel like a crude ancestor waiting to become a mammal. It feels like a separate solution. A second draft of intelligence written under different physical limits. Bone lightened for flight. Skull reduced. Processing power concentrated. A biological zip file of cognition. Inside that system sits the nidopallium caudolateral, or NCL, an integrated CPU of the avian world, a command architecture that performs many of the executive tasks you once treated as mammalian property. Working memory. Decision-making. Behavioral flexibility. The bird does not need your cortex. It builds convergent power through a different neural map. That matters because the crow is not running on instinct alone. It evaluates. It compares. It updates. Episodic like memory, biological time travel, a private reconstruction engine that replays useful fragments of the past, allows corvids to do more than react to the present. They can use prior experience to guide future behavior. This is where the insult begins to rot. You thought feathers meant simplicity. You thought a beak meant limitation. But behind the face sits a compact forecasting device built by selection pressure across millions of years. And none of that explains the dangerous part. Not that a crow remembers you. That the memory does not stay inside one crow. Before that transmission happens, another system enters the story. Vision. Human sight feels complete to you because you cannot step outside it. You do not notice your own blind architecture. The crow does. It sees with 4 color cones, tetrachromatic sensors, like an expanded optical suite calibrated beyond the human channel map. You live in 3 primary bands. The crow lives in 4. Ultraviolet enters its world as usable information. Your face is not the face you think you wear. To another human, skin reads as tone and contour. To the crow, skin can register as a textured UV map, a biometric landscape, full of contrast, patchiness, surface signals, and hidden variation. Pores, oils, keratin, scars, fabric edges, reflected spectra. What you call a crowd may look to the crow like a field of sharply differentiated identities. You cannot feel yourself being seen this way. That is part of the discomfort. The crow tracks gaze as well. Gaze detection, a threat lock sensor, like a turret that knows when another machine has aimed back, means the bird does not merely register your presence. It distinguishes the state of your attention. Are you glancing? Are you staring? Are you approaching with intent? Are you pretending not to look? The crow parses those differences and stores the result. So when it scolds, the sound is not empty outrage. It is a location broadcast. Social scolding, a distributed alarm packet, the acoustic equivalent of threat data pushed across a local network, announces more than agitation. It identifies a problem in space. The exact urban decibel profile remains uncertain in this script because the measurement varies and the clean field number is absent. The function is not absent. The function is plain. A marked human enters view. A call erupts. Nearby crows orient. Heads turn. Perches activate. The network receives the coordinate. Then the scale collapses. Your face fills the frame of the bird's perception not as a familiar human portrait but as a foreign terrain, a pale membrane scored with ultraviolet signatures, with the whites of the eyes exposed like warning lamps, with the blue hat above it burning as a crisp landmark, while the surrounding city falls away into blur and the only thing that remains in focus is the simple terrible fact that you have become distinct. This is the midpoint of the unease. Because now the crow has enough to do more than notice you. It has enough to remember. Deep inside that walnut-sized skull, the Grudge Circuit forms. The NCL, executive circuitry, the avian command deck, helps process the significance of a face. The archipallium, an action gateway, like a weapons control relay that converts evaluation into response, helps shape the behavior that follows. The exact internal experience remains hidden from us. The external consequence does not. A single bad encounter can last 5 years. 5 years. 1 negative interaction. 1 capture. 1 intrusion near a nest. 1 gloved hand. 1 masked face. Then the record remains. Not for a week. Not for a season. For 5 years. In human terms, long enough for a toddler to become a child. Long enough for a city block to change its stores and signs. Long enough for the offended bird to keep you active in its mental file while your own species forgets half the strangers it meets in a month. This is not a metaphor dressed as science. It is observed behavior. Researchers wear masks while trapping and banding crows. Later, the same masks return. The birds react. They scold. They mob. They recruit others that were never trapped. The threat face persists as a category. And here the primary paradox opens into its answer. The wanted poster survives because it does not belong to one brain alone. Social learning, encrypted data transfer through watchfulness, posture, and vocal exchange, allows crows to absorb danger from one another without direct harm to themselves. A young bird can inherit caution from elders. An uninvolved bird can learn that a certain human face carries risk. The grudge leaves the private vault and enters the public square. The intergenerational ghost is real. A crow can participate in hostility toward a person linked to an event that happened before that crow was born. The original witness ages. The original witness dies. The hostile category persists in the local culture. What began as memory becomes tradition. What began as fear becomes protocol. So the answer to the walnut brain paradox is not longer storage alone. It is network storage. The individual remembers. The group reinforces. The next generation receives. You are not dealing with a bird that hates you. You are dealing with a community that has archived you. That changes the shape of the city. The urban grid is not a backdrop. It is a three-dimensional operating system. Wires serve as surveillance rails. Streetlights serve as elevated checkpoints. Rooftops serve as command posts. Alley mouths serve as escape vectors. Parking lots radiate heat. Asphalt exhales stored temperature. High-rises shear the wind into usable channels. Thermal updrafts, invisible lift columns, like rising conveyor belts built from waste heat, reduce the cost of movement. Your infrastructure becomes their flight architecture. You feel pressure here, but not the pressure of deep water. This pressure is social. A single call can localize you. A second call can confirm you. Then more bodies appear on a line, then a roof edge, then a branch over the sidewalk. The air thickens with attention. You are not crushed by atmosphere. You are compressed by awareness. Temperature matters as well. Morning concrete releases one pattern of heat. Afternoon asphalt releases another. The crow rides those variations with a pilot's discipline. What you dismiss as weather, it uses as scaffolding. It wastes less energy reaching height. It spends more attention on you. Darkness in the city does not erase the bird. It sharpens the geometry. Obsidian. Silhouettes on power lines. Black bodies cut against sodium haze. Motion where your eyes lose detail. A shape on a parapet that vanishes when you look straight at it and reappears 3 storefronts later. Night here does not blind the network. It conceals the edges of its chassis. Then sound arrives. The scold cuts through traffic like metal striking glass. Other crows answer. The calls overlap, not as chaos, but as distributed signal. A local murder can scale with unnerving speed. In some reports and observational framings, groups reaching into the hundreds or beyond can become aware of a threat in under a minute. The number carries uncertainty across contexts. The principle does not. Recognition spreads fast. And this system is old. Genus Corvus stretches back roughly 10 million years into the Miocene, a deep time blueprint older than the last ice ages, older than our cities, older than our language as it now exists. These birds descend from post-KPG lineages that inherit a world remade by catastrophe. Later, through Pleistocene volatility, survival favors the flexible. The generalist endures. The specialist breaks. Corvid success does not depend on one narrow food source or one fragile ecological script. It depends on problem solving, social learning, diet breadth, caution, audacity, and memory. They survive by information. That may be the oldest insult to human vanity in this story. Because you still tend to rank power by size, by claws, by muscle, by the direct violence a body can perform. The crow masters the city through something colder. Not strength. Not speed. Not mass. It uses information as habitat. It uses memory as weaponry. It uses social transmission as continuity. And if a species this ancient enters our streets and thrives by reading us better than we read it, then the question begins to turn, and it turns toward us. You think intelligence should look familiar? That is your mistake. You look for hands. You look for speech shaped like your own. You look for a cortex layered in the mammalian style and mistake that design for the only legitimate route to thought. The crow dismantles that bias without asking permission. Nature does not honor your preferred blueprint. It solves the same problem through another architecture and leaves you standing beneath it, staring up at a silhouette you still call simple. But the greater humiliation is not anatomical. It is relational. Crows may be among the dominant monitors of the Anthropocene. They know our routes. They know our routines. They know which neighborhoods feed, which windows threaten, which times of day expose nest sites, which individual humans interfere, which ones ignore, which ones look up with intent. They track temperament from above while we stand below, unable to distinguish one black shape from the next. To us, they blur into category. To them, we separate into profiles. So return to the blue hat. At the beginning, it looks like an ordinary irritation. A pedestrian crosses a street. A crow descends. Harsh calls spill from a wire. Heads tilt from a rooftop. You think the bird is mean. Territorial. Unpredictable. The moment passes. The human keeps walking. The city absorbs the scene and forgets it. The crows do not forget it. The blue hat becomes a file marker. The face beneath it becomes a stored object. Not in a server farm. Not in silicon. In tissue. In voice. In the repeated attention of a social group that can pass the warning forward until the original witness is gone. That person is not being bothered. That person is being entered into a biological database with no keyboard, no screen, no written language, and no need for any of them. This is where the old phrase bird brain collapses under its own poverty. Because the human insult assumes that intelligence must resemble a human room filled with human furniture. A mammalian cortex. Spoken words. Hands manipulating tools in obvious view. But what if intelligence is broader than our furniture? What if one valid form of mind lives in compressed neuron density, tetrachromatic perception, gaze tracking, episodic-like memory, and social alarms that preserve a thread across generations? What if the city is not only our monument, but their instrument? You build cameras because you fear not knowing. They solve that problem with eyes, memory, and numbers. You build databases because you fear forgetting. They solve that problem with culture. You build networks because one mind is too small for a large world. So do they. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part. Not that crows are smart. That word is too soft. Too domestic. Too flattering to us. The harsher truth is that evolution builds an alternative model of intelligence above our streets every day, and most humans notice it only when the network decides to speak their description aloud. If a species can maintain a collective grudge across generations without a single word of spoken language, who is truly the master of information on this planet?